Hey everyone, it's Peter from Rock Daydream Nation. Today I've got a special guest. You may recognize this gentleman. His name is John Gaffney from Lair of the Alchemist. Hello, John. How's it going?
Hey Pete, thanks for having me on your channel. Looking forward to the discussion.
Look, as I said to you earlier, it's amazing. We've been on similar shows and we've never actually met. It's just those passing ships in the night type situation.
Yeah, and you're coming from where? You're in Australia?
Sydney, Australia, and you're in Florida, are you?
Yeah, I'm in Florida, so the magic of the internet brings us together.
Absolutely. I'm from the future. So, it's actually Saturday, so it'd be Friday night. It's one of those things,
All
the
right.
wonder of the internet. It just connects everyone. But one thing's for sure, we both love hard rock, heavy metal, and I've watched the show and admired a lot of the more cerebral approach that you take to metal and rock, and I find that very interesting. So glad to have you on this show. Today we're going to talk about something which I picked up an inspiration from your show, and it was about gatekeeping. And it can be a little bit of a controversial topic, and I thought we'd talk about gatekeeping in YouTube world. A lot of the bigger YouTube channels, John, like your Rick Beato's, Justin Hawkins, and Sea of Tranquility, which we've both appeared on, huge subscriber numbers. And let's face it, they're like social influencers where their opinions kind of carry over a big audience. Wouldn't you agree?
Oh yeah, yeah, for sure. I mean, I think that YouTube has replaced. I mean, it's certainly the internet has replaced magazines. If you remember, there was a point in time where record labels and bands would take out ads in magazines. I remember going to the review section of like Kerrang, for instance, where they always had a ton of reviews, and that's how I would discover bands. Well, those days are certainly over. But even in the early days of the internet, I remember specific websites that you went to read reviews and learn about bands and suggested, yeah, if you like this band, check out this band, the top 10 doom metal albums and things like that. I used to go to websites for that. And then with the dawn of YouTube, and I'd say really in the last, I don't know, 7 years, I think, 7, 8 years or so, the kind of people discussing hard rock and heavy metal, ranking things, talking about new bands, talking about old bands and stuff like that has become that's replaced magazines, it's replaced websites. So yeah, I think it's really important, and I think it has a big impact because some of these channels. I mean, you mentioned Rick Beato. I mean, how many subscribers does Rick Beato have? Probably a million.
Millions,
Yeah,
absolutely.
millions, and he gets millions of views. I mean, think about that. If you were when he interviews, like I saw, he interviewed Yngwie Malmsteen, and it has, I think, a million views or close to a million views. Now, if Yngwie was interviewed in a guitar magazine, do you think they'd sell a million copies of that guitar magazine? Even at the peak of guitar magazines, were any of them selling a million copies? Probably not, right? So the fact that you can go on a channel like if you're invited on a channel like that, you're going to get that kind of exposure. A million people are going to watch some of that video, and some of his videos are in the couple of million views. So it's really incredible when you think about it, the reach that it has. Like I said, magazines. I mean, they didn't reach an audience like that. Even if you got interviewed on the radio, were there a million people listening to the radio station when you got your 2 or 3 minute interview? I mean, probably not. So, like the reach of it and the influence of it is, yeah, it's a really powerful thing when you really sit back and think about it.
Absolutely. And interesting you brought up that Yngwie Malmsteen interview. I saw that. And that was probably one of the best interviews I've ever seen Yngwie do because it put him in a
Yeah,
very respectful light. Because let's face it, he's had a lot of bad press over time through
yeah.
a lot of websites, whether it's Blabbermouth or whether it's Metal Sludge, that he's a very prickly, difficult, egotistical character. And he sat down with Rick and just did a just a conversation and came across really well. So that just shows the impact of social influencers. And let's face it, Rick Beato is a social influencer where effectively he's turned his character around. People kind of will look at him in a different way and go, okay, maybe my opinion of Ingve is changed somewhat. And that's why sites or YouTube channels like that can make such a significant impact. Wouldn't you agree?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, and Rick Beato will have everybody from Sting to John Scofield, jazz guys, to classical pianists. I mean, he just has, so his audience, I'm sure, is some people that are probably strictly jazz people. I'm sure he has a lot of classic rock people. I'm sure he has some metal people. He's interviewed young metal guys. I forget what that one guy's name is. The guy from Polyphony, I think is the name of his band, with all the neck tattoos. You know, so he's not like just some guy talking about 70s classic rock. He's just as comfortable talking to Guthrie Govens, who's like this very technical country guitar player. He's just as comfortable talking to him as he is talking to some concert pianist, as he is talking to Ingve. And I think that's why the people that he interviews, and he now has a reputation that, and I remember early in his channel when he would say, "I hope I get more. We need more subscribers so I can get some of these people to come to my channel." I don't think he has a problem, anymore getting people coming to his channel. I mean, there's probably still some people like Paul McCartney that
Dave Gilmour.
Yeah,
he's
hey,
got this running campaign. He's trying to get Dave Gilmour on, but he won't come on.
He's had David Gilmour.
Oh, he has.
I don't know.
Okay.
Yeah, he has. He did an extensive interview with David. So he's almost. I mean, really, at this point, I think Paul McCartney, maybe Angus Young. I don't know who's left really for him to interview. That's as popular. Yeah, Richie Blackmore. But I think that again, the impact of somebody who maybe has only heard Ingve's name, like this Guthrie Govens guy. I've heard his name. I didn't really know anything about him, but I watched a video, and it was not only did I learn about him, I learned some musical things because he's doing examples talking about music. You're learning about his music. You're learning about music theory, music technique. It's really fascinating. The way he does that. I think he's one of the best at that. And you're right, like in the Ingve interview and in all the interviews he does, he lets the person he's interviewing talk. He's clearly knowledgeable about them musically. Like he never asks silly, "Oh, what was it like when you were dating this superstar?" or "Tell us the story about the time you crashed your car," or you know what I mean, like that kind of.
He doesn't insert himself into the narrative like Billy Corgan is prone to do, who's another kind of a social influencer, but that's probably another show for another day we could talk about. But with these big social influencers, John, they have their own microcosm of fans and people that follow their shows slavishly. And there's a certain amount of gatekeeping within those YouTube channels. So, Sea of Tranquility, even Rick Beato, Contrarians, they have their fans. And what I want to do is just talk about some of the gatekeeping per se by these YouTube channels. Like, firstly, gatekeeping by negativity. There are some shows out there where their whole bag is basically voicing opinions on music that are overtly negative. It's very clickbaity, but the followers seem to gravitate to that because maybe people like to get that sort of emotional release and, punching at the air, pointing at the sky. And basically, a lot of these followers within this group, anything that's outside the fence is scorned. So their views are shared. And basically, the driver of these views is probably the person right at the top and a bit of an influencer. So there may be some views that this person who has this channel that's perpetuated to the audience, and it becomes a narrative within the group, and then it gets shared in respect to the community, whether it's the metal community or the rock community. And I just wanted to go over a couple of common sort of narratives that have come out of YouTube channels and just get your views on this. All right, we'll start off with the first one, and you'll probably be familiar with this. Hair metal sucks. That's a common one that I kind of see. Def Leppard albums after Pyromania are no good.
Yeah.
Nirvana grunge killed hair metal. In classic rock world, Rolling Stones have not put out a decent album since Tattoo You. Ghost are the new Blue Oyster Cult. Mm-hmm. David Coverdale wouldn't have made it without John Sykes. So I've given you just a couple of narratives that I've certain channels, and it's a narrative that seems to be perpetuated. It's with the followers, and there's a little bit of negativity, that certain sort of benchmarks, and it kind of becomes accepted. Do you think this is a dangerous thing?
Well, I think you have to kind of think about what causes gatekeeping to begin with. And I made a video on my channel about gatekeeping. And I think part of it is metal and hard rock fans are very passionate, and it becomes part of their identity. And anytime you have a type of music that has evolved as much as heavy metal has, hard rock and heavy metal, and you have people that grew up with this, it's hard for them to accept change and things that are different. And I did a video on what did I call it? Things that define heavy metal. And one of the points I made was that heavy metal is always evolving. Like, I don't really hear that in country music, for instance. Country music doesn't seem like a type of music that's trying to break boundaries and do different things and push the limits and stuff like that. It's just, neither is pop music, right? They just don't do that. But in heavy metal, it's always evolving and it's always changing. And like I said in the video, I'm okay with, even though I don't listen to metalcore, or I kind of think Sleep Token's okay, but even though I don't listen to some newer stuff, I appreciate the fact that people are taking heavy metal and they're trying to go somewhere with it. They're trying to do something different, even if it's not something that I agree with. And I think, on when you look at the demographics, for instance, of my channel, it's mostly 45 to 55, 50 to 60, my age, basically, right? And it's hard to for people to they get protective of what they grew up on. And we do this in all aspects of life. Movies aren't as good as they used to be. TV shows aren't as good as they used to be. The sports, I'm a hockey fan, and I constantly listen to older people my age and older. The NHL was so much better in the 70s and the 80s. It's ruined now. It doesn't even look like the NHL. So like every aspect of life, everybody thinks whatever they were listening to, watching, when they were in high school and those formative years, that is the pinnacle of music, movies, sports, everything. And yeah, I do think it can be dangerous to get locked into certain narratives and not, and on my channel, I try to take sort of a level-headed approach to things. Like, even though I may not like something, I try to understand why other people might like it, why it might be important. But yeah, you're right that certain things, they get locked into certain narratives and people just run with it.
It becomes accepted.
Exactly. It almost becomes like, I did a couple of videos that I called Metal Mythbusters. And these are basically like things that people just have said these things so many times that they think it's true. Like the first episode I did was Tony Iommi tuned his guitar strings down because he cut his fingertips off. That's not true. He didn't tune his guitar down till the third Black Sabbath record. So it's just not true.
Mm.
But it gets said over and over and over again. And it just becomes one of these things that you just kind of don't even think about it. That again, grunge destroyed hair metal. David Coverdale
that's a
yeah,
big topic,
yeah, and it just like becomes sort of this sort of narrative, and I mean, there's some truth to it probably, but it's way more nuanced than that, and
more complex. There's a lot of different factors in regards to. Interesting you said, because I think there's a lot of entry point bias, and
yeah,
I admit it, I have a lot of entry point bias when it comes to my first encounter with catalogs of bands. For
hmm
example, like my entry point to Rush was Power Windows, and it's one
okay,
of my
yeah,
favorite albums. And a lot of people go, "Oh, the
that was their
ones that
jumping off point.
yes," but I
That was
love
my
it.
jumping off point. Power Windows was like my last Rush record, and I took a break from them for a couple of years. And it's funny, all you need is the difference of like, I don't know how old you are, but like we could only be maybe 3 years apart in age.
I'm
And
58.
okay, we are 3 years apart in age. Right. So sometimes just that couple years, if you hit it a few years early. I have a friend that Brave New World was his first Iron Maiden record, and it's his favorite Maiden record. I have a friend who his first Black Sabbath record was Tear with Tony Martin, and that's his favorite era of Black Sabbath. So, yeah, you're absolutely right. Like where you come into things, where your headspace is at certain times. These are all things that sort of shape how you view that music and how you appreciate that music. And people tend to be very like protective of the music that they like. Like there's so often on my channel where I'll express some opinion and somebody will get angry at me and I say, well, tell me why you like this. I mean, I'm just telling you my opinion. I don't
Mm,
like this because X, Y, and Z. This isn't my cup of tea. Tell me why you like it. I'm fascinated
mm.
to hear why you think Roll the Bones is the greatest Rush record. I mean, I'm genuinely fascinated by that because most people wouldn't consider that to be the greatest Rush record, or whatever somebody's opinion is that maybe is slightly outside the majority. Because let's face it, there is no right or wrong answers to any of this. And
Yep.
sometimes I think people want things to be more black and white, and it just doesn't work that way. And I'm sure you've done this. You go through phases where you're really into something for a little while and then maybe you never return to it, or maybe you don't return to it for 5 years, or there's an album that just never connected with you, and 10 years down the road you break it out and all of a sudden you're obsessed with it. So things change, people change, the world changes, how you see things. Certainly, I'm 55 years old. I don't see the world the same way I did when I was 15.
Yeah,
you know,
absolutely. But there's a very strong emotional response with entry point, because it might be somebody's school years. It might be a song that reminds you of a girl that you dated, or a very
oh,
happy
absolutely.
family event. And they get very protective of that. And they look at the emotional response, and that's one of the most instant emotional responses to hit out. Um, so by you sort of saying, I don't like Power Windows, people go to that emotional response without the rationalization that you're just providing a
Right.
musical critique. But with YouTube, John, I mean, some of these sites are huge, and just you know the people that run these channels, their opinions count and have so much weight and can change the narrative a lot more than print media like Rolling Stones could in the 70s, or what was Hit Parader, some of those
Yeah.
genre magazines in the 80s. It's now YouTube, isn't it? And it's these bigger channels, because of the subscribers, the numbers can, really change the dial or the barometer on a lot of different opinions.
Yeah, yeah, I agree with that. I think though, I mean, this is just human nature. A lot of the YouTube channels I watch are people roughly in my age group with similar experiences to me. Maybe that's a fault of mine. I should go out and find some young, passionate kid that has a YouTube channel talking about metalcore or whatever the latest metal trend is that this kid is totally into. Maybe, I mean, it's only kind of natural, right? We tend to gravitate towards people who that can relate to our experiences, right? Sometimes it's hard to explain to somebody the impact of the first Metallica album or something if you weren't there, if you weren't even born till 1990 or something like that, right?
Mm,
Because of the historical context of it. It's hard sometimes to explain to people. I'll be talking to young kids, and I have to, you know, always remind them that I'm talking about a time before the internet, a world before the internet. I always say it in my like years when for about 4 years, from like 89 to 94, really about 5 years, I lived without a television. The internet didn't exist yet, or I wasn't on the internet yet. I mean, I might as well have been living in a cave. And it's hard for somebody who has never lived without the internet to understand sometimes what that was like. So sometimes it's just sort of natural that you gravitate towards people, I guess, who have similar opinions to you.
yeah.
But I think that yeah, some of the channels, they can. I do see some. We've talked about Sea of Tranquility, and Pete's good about. He has fusion things. He'll talk about jazz fusion things. He'll talk about prog things, and there's things on his channel that, like, I don't know anything about the Canterbury scene. The early prog scene,
Mm.
or some of the things that he did, deep dive prog stuff that he does. That's not really a specialty of mine. So that's why I kind of like watching shows like that, because I feel like I might learn something, or
Yeah.
maybe be turned on to something new. And uh,
Mm. But there's a thing that's called affinity bias, and that's where we tend to surround ourselves with people we believe are like us. And when
yeah,
this is done collectively, in groups are kind of created. It's kind of natural that we spend time with people who share similar values, worldviews, you know. But the danger to that, John, is it can be click-like, and it kind of might be sort of the mob rules sort of thing, and any
yeah.
sort of views that are sort of a little bit on the fringes are scorned upon, and that's the downside of the gatekeeping in YouTube world. Don't you agree?
Yeah, yeah, for sure. I mean, I know the stuff I talk about on my channel is stuff that I enjoy, and I don't go too far out of. I mean, there's things that I like that I don't discuss at all on my channel. I'm very into avant-garde classical music. I'm very into funk jazz and stuff like that, and I don't talk about that on the channel because I just kind of, I mean, maybe I should, but I just kind of assume
Mm,
that people are probably not going to be interested in it. So, and it's just natural, I guess, that for the people on the channel, if they put out a certain type of video, they get a positive reaction to it. And the natural thing is just to keep moving in that direction rather than challenging or pushing your audience. And the problem is there's so many YouTube channels now that uh, it's hard for people to say, I don't know who this band is. I'm gonna listen to this guy talk about them for 10 minutes. Whereas when they're scrolling through the endless amount of channels, they see, top 20 Iron Maiden songs. Yeah, that's something I feel comfortable with. I'm gonna go there.
yeah.
So I sort of get it from the YouTube side of it, because I have a channel, you have a channel too. But yeah, Yeah, I agree with
It's
you.
not it's not an easy question. I don't think we're going to solve the world's problems in this discussion, but it's certainly an interesting discussion. I want to talk to you about the other side of the coin, and that's gatekeeping by overt positivity. So there are certain channels out there where there's zero negativity. It's a little bit of a kumbaya bubble approach. You know, everything is beautiful. No, absolutely no criticism of albums. We just put a shining light on everything. Um, is that all being authentic? Because you and I, we take an approach to music criticism. There's light and shade. There's heaven and hell. There's light and day. You know what I mean? Should
Yeah,
is it
no,
going
I
to the
know.
other going to the other extreme and
Yeah,
banning anything negative? Are you actually being authentic?
yeah, and I know what you mean. And there was a friend of mine. Uh, I haven't done one of these episodes in a while, but I used to do midweek maiden episodes, and there's these two guys that are friends of a friend, and I said, "Wow, those guys are like hardcore maiden maniacs." And I was like, "I'd love to have those guys on the show." And my friend said, "Ah, you know what? The problem is that they just love everything. They will not differentiate anything. They will tell you that the worst song from the Blaze era is just as good as Rhyme of the Ancient Mariner or the best. There's nothing. It's just everything is great. They won't say anything. They can't really have a discussion about the band." And I thought, yeah, that doesn't do anybody any favors, right? You can still be a fan of the band and be objective and have things you like and dislike about that band. This happens to me all the time on the channel. Was like, you don't like that band. No, it's not true. It's like when I did my 5 things I don't like about heavy metal. Well, you're not a real metal fan. What? Are you
Mm.
crazy? No. It's just that there's some things that I like and there's some things that I don't like. Every band that I love, Black Sabbath, my favorite band, I could still tell you some things I don't like about Black Sabbath. There's some things that were misses for the band, and some things that worked, and some things that worked better than other things, and et cetera, et cetera. And if you can't be sort of objective about it, and this goes back to what you were talking about earlier, what I had mentioned about how people, it becomes part of their identity. And so they almost get like angry. And like if you're criticizing their band, it's almost like a personal attack on them, and they can't see it, and then they take it personally and they get angry. And on my channel, I do this all the time. Somebody will leave me a really negative, nasty comment. And I had this with the things I dislike about heavy metal. And I was genuinely sincere with this. There were like 4 or 5 people that really attacked me, called me names, said all this stuff. And I said, "Hey, why don't you come on the channel and we'll talk about it?" And
Mm.
I was sincere about it. Like, I enjoy listening to somebody tell me why an album I don't like is their favorite record, or them telling me why my favorite record they can't stand. I like that. I like hearing other people's opinions because that's what makes the world interesting, right? You like pistachio ice cream and I like vanilla swirl or whatever, right? It makes it interesting. I've been toying with the idea of doing a series called where I bring people on and like something that they disagree with me on. Let's have a discussion about it. Let's just not don't just leave a comment and say you're an idiot. Well, why am I? Tell me why you disagree with me. I'm not going to get angry that somebody
Mm.
doesn't like the same AC/DC records that I don't. So yeah, and I,
It's
I think sometimes when you're afraid to be objective about it, it's what it is the website Blabbermouth. You know what Blabbermouth is? It's like a news website. It's been around
um,
forever, and they do reviews.
they've picked up some of my interviews, so I know them.
Okay, and their
Yeah.
reviews, all the reviews are 8.5s. So like, why do I want to take anything I don't even look at their reviews of records anymore because everything is like an 8 or an 8.5. So if everything is a 10 or everything is a
Mm,
0, I mean, the flip side of that is that if it's just all negative and you complain all the time, I don't want to hear that just as much as I don't want to hear just somebody, every Iron Maiden record is the greatest record that was ever released. Every Iron Maiden song is the greatest song that was ever recorded. There is no flaw. They do no wrong. To me, that wouldn't be an interesting conversation for me to have with that person because there's no nuance to it. There's no personality to it. I mean, there's again, take anything, sports, movies. There's certain movies that I like, others that I don't. There's others in series, the Star
yeah,
Wars trilogies and stuff. There's ones I like better than others. There's scenes that I like better than, you know what I mean? There's levels and nuance to it. And to me, that's what makes it interesting. So if you're too much of one or the other, being all positive, and I get the urge to do that because then you probably don't get as much blowback. You get more blowback when you're
mm,
critical and negative to something. Like if I say I don't like something, and even if I give my reasons why I don't like it, I'll get people that will come at me and just, "Oh, you're an idiot. You don't know what you're talking about." But if
mm.
I praise things, people will most, yeah, I like that record too. I very rarely then get like the negative, oh, you don't know what you're talking about. Like you don't, it just, so yeah, it has to be, you have to have some sort of balance somewhere in the middle.
Absolutely. I think it's being authentic because if you're extremely negative or extremely positive, I don't think you're being authentic because life is full of colors. And if you're only concentrating on one color palette, then you're not picking up the full story. And let's face it, YouTube and social media is the new frontier of music criticism because people don't read print anymore.
Yeah.
So shows like you and I and Sea of Tranquility and all the other shows, that this is the new form of music criticism. But I can tell you one thing for sure. I have missed out on some interviews on the basis that there might have been a record or a show that I've done that's been negative. Negative in the sense that it's just, I didn't like that album and I've missed out on interviewing this person.
Oh,
So,
really?
and there's other shows that I haven't been invited onto because I believe in honesty and you've just got to be true to yourself and authentic. And I think that a lot of people, YouTube is a career. And this is the dilemma, the catch 22, that if you pigeon yourself, hole yourself into being negative or overtly positive,
Yeah.
and then you're going down this monetize path where it's now an income, you sort of wedged yourself in, you boxed yourself in, and it becomes very difficult. You're really nervous about maintaining the audience and not
Yeah.
losing an audience. And that's why authenticity comes into it. How much does this whole thing about YouTube paying you an income affect the social influencing, the opinions? It adds another sort of shade to this whole conversation.
Absolutely. And I've seen channels that they release some negative stuff or some clickbaity type titles and they start getting more views and they keep running with, I mean, even outside of the music YouTube channels, I see people doing that. They go down this a certain path. And when you said about people that are all negative or they're all positive, and what happens when they're like that is that you kind of don't, you stop kind of believing them because it's like there's certain channels that I know if this person's talking about this and they really love it, I'm like, oh wow, man, he really loves this record. That's, I got to check this out because he's, for him to be this passionate about it. I mean, people have said that on my channel too, like, oh, and I can see you're really passionate about that. I'm gonna check it out just for those reasons. Or if that person doesn't like it, I believe it's sincere because it's, this person again has all these different nuances to what they do, and it just doesn't feel like they're just doing it for the sake of doing it. And look, I have a channel, and I admit I look at the numbers, and sometimes you think about maybe if I did this or if I did that. And I guess you have to be yourself. And hopefully, I don't know, I'm on my channel. I don't really know. Hopefully people think I'm sincere. I've had people run into me and in not a lot, but I've had people in public. Maybe I'm at a show or something and somebody recognizes me and yeah, I had somebody say, "Oh, you're just like you are on your channel." And I'm like, "Well, yeah, because I just turn the camera on and hit record and I just go. I don't even edit my videos." I was just watching, gosh, what was this for? It wasn't a music related video, but the video that the guy was doing, whatever the topic was, I swear he had an edit like every 3 seconds. He'd be talk and then it would cut and then cut. And I was like, come on, man. Like none of this is spontaneous. You're just like so probably being so careful with your words and to a fault maybe my channel suffers because of that because I just turn the camera on and I just rant, so sometimes not rant but just talk, so sometimes you get me repeating myself, sometimes you get me saying things that don't make any sense, or I get something wrong or something like that. But I've always wanted it to be the channels that I like are the ones that feel most conversational, that are just somebody like you. I could picture myself at a bar having a drink and having this conversation with this person. So
Like we're doing now.
yeah, exactly right. It's just like two guys hanging out talking. I could be in your living room and we'd be having the
Well,
exact
you
same
actually are.
conversation.
There it is. You're having a conversation. John, I want to talk about fan sites. So YouTube channels that are devoted to a particular band. And this really comes into gatekeeping. And I've had my stoushes and been a little bit bruised and beaten up by such sites as the Beatles. I'm a Beatles fan. So
Ooh,
Beatles fan
yeah.
sites. I've done a couple of shows that had a very sort of a narrative that was a bit contrarian and got beaten up.
Ooh,
Kiss
yeah.
fan sites have been
Ooh,
that's pretty dangerous. They're pretty
yeah.
slavishly somewhat to a point of a cult, and
Yeah.
also Rush fan sites.
Yep. I've taken my lumps from I haven't done really any Beatles stuff, but I've taken my lumps from Kiss fans because I always say I'm not I like Kiss, but I'm not any kind of super fan. I think
Mm,
that Kiss has a lot of flaws. I tend to get beat up a little. Ironically, Iron Maiden's one of my favorite groups, but again, I'm objective about Iron Maiden. You know, I did a video like what I don't like about modern Iron Maiden, and
mm,
one of the points I made was the songs are too bloody long.
I
You know, they
agree.
should, yeah, right. And so many people came at me about that, and I was like, well, you know, this isn't exactly a hot take. Like no one else has ever said this, that their songs could be edited
Mm,
down. They could use maybe a producer that trims down their songs. And again, I'm a huge Iron Maiden fan. I have an Iron Maiden podcast, The Pod Somewhere in Time. Check it out. I
mm,
love Iron Maiden. But again, I can be objective and say, hey, you know, this could be better, or this is, I don't like this aspect. I still listen to modern Iron Maiden, but you know, I'm just being honest when I express my opinions on some of
yeah.
these things. So yeah, I know what you mean. There's certain like you mentioned the Beatles. I don't really talk about the Beatles, even though I love the Beatles. But I know that's an area where people will get real angry at you real quick, you know, when it comes
Yeah.
to like the Beatles and you know, Pink Floyd to a certain degree. Rush certainly has very hardcore fans to get, you know, real angry if you you know, say the wrong thing.
Yeah, and that comes into gatekeeping by positivity because everything's got to be beautiful. It's got to be kumbaya. Everything, the Beatles or Kiss or Rush, it's got to be totally favorable.
And to me, it's look. I mean, hey, I love hanging out with people and sitting there talking about how great a certain album is, and we all love the record, and it's just, yeah, isn't it? Yeah, this is great. But I also, again, I'm fascinated in people and different perspectives, and so I find it really interesting when somebody has some really bizarre, contrarian opinion on something. I'm like, oh, that's really interesting. Like, why do you like that record? And I often, as long as the person is sincere and passionate about it, yeah, I always use the example. I used to know this guy that was super into model trains. That's something I'm totally not interested in. And whenever I was around this guy, he would talk about model trains, and he was so passionate about it that I loved listening to this guy talk about it. I have zero interest in model trains, but because this guy was passionate about it, I liked listening to him talk about it. So if somebody is really genuinely passionate about an album that I don't like, I would very much enjoy listening to that person talk about that. And just to the same extent that somebody who maybe I really like a record and they don't like it, or they really like a record and I don't. It's fun that the world, it makes the world interesting if we
I
all
know.
agree on the same things.
Well, the best theatre I've had on YouTube has been my stoushes with Martin Popoff, which I've had a few. And I had a show on the Contrarians where he says there is no blues in Black Sabbath. And I argued the point there are. Don't get me started, John. We'll do this on a separate time. But we went hammer and tongs.
I've had this discussion with Martin also.
Yeah, and he's very fixed in his views, and I've got a different view. But it makes great theatre. And it's great for YouTube because nobody wants to hear the kumbaya, which is everyone is singing from the same song sheet. It makes interesting viewing where you've got somebody with a diverse opinion, well argued, thought out, and logical. It's what we used to do at school called debating. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and the thing is that, like, when you mentioned Martin's a very knowledgeable person, and if he has an opinion on something, he has researched it and thought about it. It's like if somebody asks me about Psychobilly, I know nothing about Psychobilly, so I feel it's not my place to say it's great or it's bad. I know nothing about it. And sometimes people on the channel say, "Hey, do you like this, that, or another thing?" And I say, "I haven't heard that, or I know nothing about that." So if you have somebody and you're trying to talk about heavy metal with somebody that's never listened to heavy metal and they're telling you why it's awful and terrible, and you're like, yeah, but you've never even listened to it, that's not a conversation. It's not. So if it's somebody like, again, when you talk about Martin, even Martin might have something that contrary opinion on something, but he's well versed on it. So when I mean, I love Martin. I have a ton of his books, and I do my AC/DC podcast with Martin, and I just love Martin. He's just such an intelligent guy. But we don't agree on a lot of stuff. Probably more than 50% of stuff we differ on. But he's very articulate, he's well studied. And so when he has his opinion, I respect his opinion, even though it may not be my opinion on it. So
But it's logical, it's sensible, and it's well argued. I
yeah,
mean,
yeah,
I've got my own resident Martin Popoff on my channel, Read Little, and we don't agree on a lot of things. But the viewers love him because he has that contrary view. They might throw things at the screen, but at the end of the day, they're entertained, and it's very well thought out and it's logical. So I think it makes it interesting for viewers to have diversity. And it comes into this whole overtly negative, overtly
yeah,
positive, the gatekeeping. It's a bit bland, isn't it? A bit beige, because you're just going to be hearing the one note.
yeah. And again, like, I mean, there's some things that, like, I've had this discussion about the Black Album. A lot of people in our age demographic don't like the Black Album. They feel that it is when Metallica lost it and they weren't good anymore, et cetera, et cetera. That's fine. You can have that opinion. That you're welcome to have your opinion, but don't say that it's when their career went down the tubes. That's just flat out wrong. That's one of the biggest selling records of all time across any genre. It's just statistically that's not true. I've had this argument. I think I mentioned the CD video that I made. I also made a video of like, I forget what it was, something like nobody buys CDs anymore or something like that. And I also had a similar video where I talked about being in your bubble. When you're in your bubble, in our world, we still buy CDs or we still buy records. But outside of our bubble, that's not the case. And I've even said this with music in general. We're super passionate about this. We love getting into the minutia and the nitty gritty of bands and albums and songs and all this other stuff. The majority of people listen to music in their car or from a playlist on Spotify. They're not as passionate about it as we are. So sometimes when you're inside your own little bubble, it's hard to see. Like again, the CD thing that CDs aren't as popular as CDs are as popular as ever. No, they're not. Here's a chart. Sales of CDs are down 97% from their peak in the early 2000s. There is no metric. If you had a restaurant and your sales were down 97%, no one would consider that a success. No one would consider that a good thing. That is not good. Going down 97% is not good. In your world, CDs may be as popular as ever. In my
It's a
world, they may
narrative.
be too. Or in your
It,
friend's world, they may be. Just like, again, the Black Album. You can hate on the Black Album all you want, but it's one of the biggest selling records of all time. It sold millions and millions and millions of copies. It turned Metallica into a stadium band. So dislike it all you want, but don't say it was a failure. Don't say it was a flop because it wasn't. It was a massive selling record. And that's just a statistical thing.
yeah,
They
absolutely.
sold 80 million copies or whatever.
Yeah, I've got a little theory about this. So I kind of grew up with Metallica right from the start because I heard that music pretty early on in the day. And I think when a big band breaks through commercially and becomes big into the mainstream, because for a band to sell that many copies, it's going to be your next door neighbor and their neighbor and their neighbor buying music, which was very genre specific, the metal fans. Now it's breaking into the mainstream. You feel like I'm losing this band. And it's sort of
Yes.
like you're feeling a little bit threatened. You know
It
what I
goes
mean?
back to that thing where these bands feel personal to us. And because metal it was never, it's always been an underdog. Even at its peak during the glam LA days in the mid 80s when it was charting on the charts in the US all over the world and Rat and
Yes.
bands like Quiet
Yes.
Riot and bands like that, it was still had kind of an underdog type of
Working
thing.
class, and it's working
It,
class.
so because of that, you have this like personal thing with it where you're it's personal to you and you're protective of it. And so you're right. When it does sort of break into the big mainstream, when I've said this on my channel, like rock and roll isn't dangerous anymore. You go into Walmart and you can buy a Guns N' Roses beach blanket. You can buy an AC/DC swim shorts or something like that. It's sort of taken. And when you see that, it hurts a little bit because it was so personal to you and it felt like it was just something that it was your thing and your friends, it was all your thing. And then when it becomes, so I get it, like with Metallica, I mean, it becomes where there's people that, oh yeah, I love Metallica. What's your favorite record? Well, I don't know. I only have the Black Album. I just love Enter Sandman. I don't know anything else. And you're kind of like, this person really? This person isn't a fan to the extent that I am. So I get it, but again, it's the bubble thing. Outside of our bubble, there's a lot of people that don't dive as deep into this stuff as we do. They own the Black Album, they own Back in Black, they own Appetite for Destruction, maybe they own Invasion of Your Privacy. And they just don't go, maybe they own Paranoid, maybe they own Machine Head. They just don't go any deeper than that. And there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing
Mm.
wrong with that. I have friends that are super into movies and they get angry at me when I say, the only way to watch this is with the German cut Blu-ray 72 def version.
Mm.
And I'm just like, I don't care. I'll stream it on Netflix. And they get angry at me. Or how could you not watch the 7 parts to this movie? I'm like, I don't know. I just don't care. I just
Yeah.
watched the one. I like the one, and that's fine. And I just left it at that.
But
Because
it's like my band that I had a personal connection to. I may have seen them when they were in a pub or a small club, and now they're broken big, and I feel like I've lost them.
yeah,
It's like this separation. It's like losing it, because all these examples, like the one that you were saying about the breakthrough commercial album, is, I don't think a lot of those early fans really truly like those albums, do they? The ones that like the San Francisco Bay City, those thrash albums, they don't like the Black Album. You know, early
yeah,
Whitesnake fans don't like 1987 because it was a change in
right.
direction, but that was an uber smash. The
Yeah,
early fans of Def Leppard, High and Dry, they don't like
yeah.
Hysteria. So there's not
But
many
then there's
that
a whole group of people that just love Hysteria and et cetera, et cetera, So it's things change, bands change. Look, I'm a musician. Stuff that I used to like 20 years ago, maybe I don't like it anymore, or I don't write songs the way I used to write songs. Things change, people change, their lives change. Metallica in 1980, when the first record came out, whatever year that was, 83, 84, they're 19, 20-year-old, angry at the world, guys with chips on their shoulder. And after the Black Album, they're millionaires, And so their perspective on life is just different and it changes. And so that's all right. It's like, to me, I made this video that was, what did I title it? Are we living in the final glory days of metal? And what I meant by that was the pioneers, the people that wrote the playbook, Maiden, Priest, Sabbath, all these Motorhead, all these bands. Some of the Black Sabbath isn't touring anymore. Ozzy has passed. Lemmy has passed. Maiden and Priest are still out there putting out music. Is it as good as the stuff that they did in the 80s? No, not by my opinion. I like that stuff better. But hey, these bands are still around. They're still putting out music. It's still enjoyable. We should be embracing this because in where are we going to be in 5 to 10 years? Maybe none of these bands are going to be around anymore. And our grandkids will sit on our lap and ask us what it was like in the 2020s, the early 2020s, when Priest was still putting out records and touring, and Maiden was still putting out records and touring, and all these
mm,
giants of the huge influential people of heavy metal were still out there putting out records and still doing things. What was it like, Grandpa, when those bands were still around? Just like when people sometimes I like jazz music, so sometimes I think back like, wow, man, what was it like to be in New York when Miles was playing here and down the block Charlie Parker was playing and a block over John Coltrane was playing. It's like this. So we should appreciate where these things are at. That doesn't mean, again, we can be critical of it. We can have our favorites, things we like and that we don't like. But I try not to shut myself off to anything. I try to leave myself open to things,
open.
appreciate
Yep.
them for what they are. I completely understand that Iron Maiden in 2025 isn't going to be Iron Maiden from 1980. The world has changed. They have changed. So enjoy the journey, right? It's kind of fun seeing where Iron Maiden is at this point in their life. It's fun seeing where Judas Priest is at this point in their life. All these artists, we've grown with them. I've changed, they've changed. So it's kind of a fun journey because when Ozzy passed, that hit me really hard because I grew up with Ozzy and I felt like he was a huge part of my youth and my life. It's like the guy was always there.
And
You
we
know,
went through that emotional journey with the concert, and then 3 weeks later, he's gone. That
yeah,
was just the added gut punch to a lot of folk. Um, but look, I agree with you, and I think the danger with metal is that if there's excessive gatekeeping, which you did on your eloquently did on your video, if there's too much gatekeeping, it's going to be as relevant as jazz music. It's going to be
yeah,
a very specialist type of music genre. Because let's face it, pop is ruling. Hip hop, pop is all in the charts. And the glory days when metal had that commercial breakthrough, John, in the 80s, is probably long gone. And
yeah.
and I think a lot of people have to look at accepting cross genres for metal to reinvent itself and become relevant again. Because if metal is a big tree, isn't it? There's so many branches, and I can't keep up with all the subgenres. If it becomes too far expanded, then it's going to become like jazz and become a very specialty genre. I think people have to just embrace there's going to be a lot of genre crossing, like Sleep Token, for example. I was on Sea of
Yeah.
Tranquility and I did the review crew, and I was somebody put a comment, oh, finally, had to get an Australian to review Sleep Token on Sea of Tranquility.
Yeah,
But
I mean,
I think it
you're
was just
exactly right.
relevant. It's a good album. I like it, and it's
Yeah.
relevant, and it's a mixture of all these different things. There's pop and metal, and it blows people's minds that you've got one extreme of one music genre mixed with another extreme, and it's meshed. But it was number one, So I think it's got to be reviewed, criticized, praised, whatnot. It's a valid piece of art.
Yeah, and again, I'd like to tie this all in with the gatekeeping and everything. You don't want to close the gate doors because you don't want to circle the wagons too much. I mean, you do have to sometimes draw a line and make sure people understand, respect the history and everything like that, all that kind of stuff. But we want things to grow and expand, and we want them. See, here's the thing: like Sleep Token, I don't know a whole lot about them. I have listened to them, but I've looked them up on YouTube, and you know the reviews that I see for them? It's all young kids, kids in their early 20s going crazy about the new Sleep Token record, just, going nuts about it. I mean, video after video of young 20 somethings just really into this. And to me, that just, I love that because that shows to me that there's this, and they're interpreting it their way. There was, I'm sure if you're 10 years older than us and you were in high school in 1974 and you grew up on Blue Cheer and Jimi Hendrix and maybe Rainbow and Thin Lizzy and stuff like that, stuff like Rat or stuff like Venom just sounded ridiculous, probably. And like, this is horrible. This doesn't have anything to do with, right. But it keeps changing. And every generation, I'll be scared when there isn't a band that the young kids don't like. And in some ways, it makes me, and I almost feel good that I don't understand it. No,
Exactly.
that's the way it should be. It should be like the stuff that the kids are getting into is their own thing. And I hear that in Sleep Token. It's very much like I don't know anything about those guys. I'm assuming they're young guys in the band.
Mm.
That this is their metal filtered through their life experiences and their listening habits and everything like that. And that's what it should be. And so I'm totally okay with things reflecting the times and reflecting what the kids are into. There's a great. I didn't do a video. I made the video. I never put it out. There's this band called Turnstile. I don't know if you know who they are. They're like they're kind of like a punk, heavy rock, punk, hardcore-ish type band. They're from Baltimore, and they did a free concert at in some field in Baltimore somewhere. And there's just like 20,000 kids, 10,000 kids at this show. And it's so refreshing because the camera pans out and you see it's just all young kids. And we're really quick to often say, oh, kids don't like music anymore. They don't care about music. They don't go, they're just video games and they can't TikTok. They can't pay attention to anything anymore. Bollocks, right? Watch this turnstile video. There's 10,000 kids losing their minds, singing along. The band is playing on a concrete stage. There's like barely any security. There's no lights. There's no stage props. It's just these kids getting up there and rocking hard. They remind me of Fugazi, if you know who Fugazi is. They got that kind of vibe to them. Uh, and they're the kids, and they're really socially relevant too. They're a band they're young, they're singing about things that mean things to kids their age, and the kids are digging it. The kids were going crazy. And in that video that I never released, I said if I was at that concert and came walking over the hill and saw all those kids, I would have went home. And you know why I would have went home? Because that's their thing. It's their time. It's their band. It's their music. It's for them. And you watch the video clips of that band in the comments down there, the kids are like, I'm going to tell my kids that I was at this show. This was a once in a lifetime thing. This was something special. There was magic in the air. And it just warms my heart when I see things. So even though I'm not going to be listening to Sleep Token a lot or at all, it still warms my heart that there's bands doing things, that there's kids interpreting heavy metal, taking the mantle, doing their thing with it, interpreting it their way. Don't close the gates. Let's leave the gates open and welcome in as many people as we can. We can't afford to shut anybody out. Let's
Absolutely.
keep an open mind.
Yeah.
We're here to educate the kids. That's what our channel's about, right? Maybe to educate the kids on the 70s and the 80s and where bands like Sleep Token came from. So we play an important part in this, and they play an important part in it.
It's all about inspiration. Where did this band get its sound from? Go back in time. Any of these bands, I love going live. Music's where it's at, folks. Look, I like the world of CDs and vinyl and all that sort of record store thing, but I think live music is where it's at. And I enjoy seeing new bands and seeing kids that were brought up on their fathers' or parents' Iron Maiden or Judas Priest albums and interpreting it. And sometimes I see a mixture that their parents may have been into Duran Duran or synth pop, and then they put it with a little bit of hard rock. The kids are interpreting it, John, into a mesh, and it makes it interesting because Sleep Token, you can't really pigeonhole it into a particular genre because it's got so many bloody genres within it. So, and it just makes it quite interesting. So I think from a gatekeeping perspective, I agree with you. Let them in. Otherwise, our music's going to wither on the vine, and we don't want that to happen. And there's going to be
and why do we want to shut anybody out? If somebody wants to, another thing I made in my gatekeeping video is people getting angry when you're at a show and there's somebody there who doesn't look like they belong there, like they just walked in to see what's going on. What's wrong with that? Let them do that, And Sleep Token, maybe Sleep Token is the gateway band that eventually leads to somebody getting into Morbid Angel or Slayer or whatever, right? There's the Black Album is a huge gateway record. There's tons of people that were 12 or 13 years old when the Black Album came out, and that was their gateway into heavy metal, and eventually led them to go down rabbit holes and discover where all this. I do it too. I mean, in the 80s, I wasn't listening to anything from the late 60s and stuff. I was just listening to what was out at that moment in the 80s. But as I got older, I started going backwards. Hey, let me check out, I always hear these guys talk about Cream or the Yardbirds or Blue Cheer or Mountain. And that's how then I went back and started discovering those bands and learning about them and the history of it all. So everybody's maybe my gateway was Back in Black from AC/DC or Quiet Riot's Metal Health or whatever. But it's all good, man, that there's enough room in the tent for everybody. We don't want it to, like you said, we don't want it to become a museum piece where the music is only something that it's like doesn't evolve, it doesn't change. It becomes like a Renaissance band or something where people dress up in costumes and like cosplay or something, you know.
Yeah,
It's like,
absolutely. Absolutely. John, it's been wonderful. I've got to get you back on the show. Love to have a chat. This has
yeah,
been a real entertaining chat. We've gone in a lot of different directions because we're a gatekeeping, but it's sort of like the world and everything about YouTubing and just music in general. So it was, I really enjoyed today's chat. So you can see John on the Lair of the Alchemist. I'll put the link below. Folks, I love reading your comments. Please put your comments on what you think about gatekeeping. I'm sure that there's some commentary here that you don't agree with. All viewpoints are welcome. Please like and subscribe to Rock Daydream Nation. But one thing's for sure, we're still pumping out shows. Looking forward to 2026. Once again, John, it's been a pleasure having you on the show, and hope to see you soon.
thank you so much for having me here, Peter. I really enjoyed it.
Cheers. Thanks a lot.